There we go. The Gashouse Gang with Kevin Wheeler. I'm Tom Ackerman. Always a thrill to be able to talk sports with my pals. And we do it on all of these social media channels on YouTube, and it's replayed in podcast form and video form and on the air on KMOX. It's a pleasure to be joined by Kevin Wheeler, Tom Ackerman here. And Wheels, let's get into some baseball. We have a lot of things to get into. College football playoff rankings coming out. The Blues are bad. We'll talk about them.
How about just not trying? How about that?
I thought you were going to say not talk about them. We will talk about them. Let's continue our baseball conversation, though. I got initially a little irritated yesterday when I saw two different things. One, the National League Cy Young Award finalist. The National League Rookie of the Year Award finalist, and Mason Winn wasn't on it. Then I saw MLB put out a big graphic with, who's the game changer at shortstop or whatever it was.
Right.
And there are all these shortstops, and Winn wasn't on there. Then I started,
including one guy that's not a shortstop anymore, right? As Matt Pauley pointed out, O'Neill Cruz moved to the outfield.
Cruz, although shortstop for most of the year, but
I know. Yeah.
Then I started to think about it. I'm like, well, first of all, the Cardinals weren't good, so they're by their standards. I mean, they were a winning team, but they weren't in the race, so they kind of, out of everybody's mind. They're not a sexy team anymore, so no one really buzzes about the Cardinals. And then I thought about it, and I'm like, there are a lot of good shortstops out there, and there are also a lot of good. I mean, the National League Rookie of the Year, you're talking about Jackson Merrill of the Padres. Good. Jackson Churio had an awesome year for the Brewers.
Yep.
And Paul Skeens should win it. He's a Cy Young finalist.
Yeah.
So that's a tough trio to break.
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway on Rookie of the Year. Just bad luck for Mason Winn, because in most years he's definitely a finalist, and in a lot of years, I think Matt Pauley pointed out on our little group text yesterday that if he was in the AL, he might have won it this year.
Yeah,
like it's just a crazy group of rookies in the National League that has nothing to do with Mason Winn. He was phenomenal, obviously, a finalist for this award, but also for the Gold Glove as well. So you're talking about a really important, impactful player for the long term. And, I shouldn't even say it that for now and for the long term, right? Both short and long term. But, when it comes to recognition, it's going to be tough for Mason. And I think, baseball fans in St. Louis need to get used to that. I mean, Ellie De La Cruz isn't going anywhere. You've got Francisco Lindor. He's not going anywhere. These are good players that are elite at the top of the game. And that's not even counting Willy Adames and all these other guys. So when you're talking about the competition for attention, for headlines, for awards, it's not going to be easy. But that doesn't mean a guy can't be an amazing player. It just means that he may not win the awards that he could win in other circumstances.
Do you agree with me that Skeens is going to run away with that NL Rookie of the Year, even as good as those guys were?
I think he's going to win it. And run away with it might be tough because Jackson Merrill was amazing.
Yeah, he was.
I mean, you talk about a guy that brought power and speed and changed positions. That dude was a shortstop until this spring training. Never played the outfield in the minor leagues, and they stick him in the outfield, and he's damn good out there. But yeah, I think Skeens is the story, right? I mean, Skeens didn't throw as many innings as some of the other top guys, which is why he's not going to win a Cy Young. But he probably was the most dominant pitcher on the planet.
Yeah, popularity contest, and he's the big story.
Yeah.
But let me go back to Mason Winn for a minute and pump him up a little more. Mason Winn is the only player on the Cardinals, correct me if I'm wrong, the only player on the Cardinals that we know for sure fills a starting position. We don't know first base. Well, we do now. It's Wilson Contreras. But
right.
We didn't at the end of the year. First base was still up for grabs. Second base. Third base, we're not totally sure if Arenado is going to be around. Outfield, not completely sure what those three positions look like. Catcher, starting rotation, bullpen. I mean, the one thing we know for sure is who the Cardinals shortstop is. That is a major credit to Mason Winn. It's my belief that Mason Winn 0 jerseys should be selling front and center in that clubhouse. If you were to pattern somebody, your kid, after somebody on this team right here, right now, it's Mason Winn. I mean, he was given an opportunity. He took it. He ran with it. He was not a good hitter in 2023, and he took the bull by the horns and made himself into a very good player in just 1 year and learning how to be great. I'm very impressed with him.
Yep, and I want to take that. This is why I wanted to bring up Mason Winn to start. This, to me, I think the team that the Cardinals should be patterning themselves after is the Atlanta Braves, because I think they can play in the financial range that the Braves do. You know what I mean? Like, I think the Cardinals play at a higher level than Milwaukee. Not, I think, we all know they play at a higher level than Milwaukee when it comes to money. They will always have more money than the Brewers. They will always be a higher revenue team than the Brewers, but they're very similar to the Braves. Well, what did the Braves do when they found out they had young stars? They signed them right away. They signed them long-term right away. Now, some of this has to be the player willing to do it. I don't know if Mason Winn would be willing to do it. If I'm the Cardinals, I'm having that conversation right now. I'm having that conversation right now to lock him in for the next 6, 7, 8 years, whatever we can get set up. Because the one thing that he has two things that aren't going anywhere: defense and speed. Even if he doesn't hit great, and I think he's already shown signs he's going to be a really good hitter, right? I think it won't be long before we're talking about Mason Winn hitting 20 home runs, my opinion.
Yeah.
But even if he stays where he is offensively, even if he were to slip a little offensively, which I don't think he will, you're still an elite defender with elite speed and elite arm strength. This is the time to do it. Do it before you get into arbitration years, because the closer you get to free agency, the less incentive a player has to want that. But if you can offer them a lot more short-term security and a guaranteed deal, I mean, look at what the Braves did with Acuna and Albies. They didn't wait around, because if you wait around, this is the kind of player that down the road is going to be really expensive, and you can give yourself cost certainty and lock in a guy that, by the way, one of the hardest positions to fill with an offensive player, right? I mean, you've got an offensive player who has offensive upside on top of what we've seen. I think it's a good time to start having that conversation.
100%. And he's a ball player. He's smart. He has a brilliant mind. I've spent some time with him. I really, really like him. I love the way that he respects the Cardinals past. Like, he's the perfect Cardinal. He loves Ozzie Smith. He wanted to be 0 so he could be closest to Ozzy's 1. They're on they're doing features together in Cardinals magazine and whatnot. I mean, love this guy. So, yeah, he's terrific. Who else would you try to ink right now to a long-term deal? I mean, I think that a year ago we were all talking about Jordan Walker. That talk has kind of backed off a little bit until you see more out of Jordan. But those two great friends are the future of the team, along with Gorman. I know we've mentioned all the others, but those are kind of the big two and have been for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, Walker would have had to have a better year this year for that conversation to be more realistic, because right now, how do you do it? How does the player commit to probably taking below what you would want because he hadn't produced? And how does the team commit to more when they haven't seen production? And he doesn't have the same fallback that Mason Winn does, right? Mason Winn's floor is like an average to slightly below average hitter, but elite defender and runner, right? That's his floor. And I think above average hitter to excellent hitter is probably more the realistic range between now and the age of 30. So, you're really getting a guy with a high floor. I don't think we've established Walker's floor yet. I don't think we have. I mean, his ceiling is 35, 40 homers. I don't think we've figured out that floor yet, though. So it's hard to do it that way. But, a guy that fits the description, I don't know that I would do it because of where he is age-wise, but also because of some of the other depth considerations within the organization. Because, I want to talk about J.J. Weatherholt in a minute because he's going to play into this. But a guy that's in that conversation is probably Brendan Donovan. When you're looking at him, got a few years left. If you think that he should be a core player, he's probably not super expensive right now. And because he's not a home run hitter, isn't going to be a break the bank kind of guy, right? He's not a 30 homer guy, so he's not going to be a $25 million a year player. If there's a reasonable way to do something with him, sure, I think you could look at that too, because the best thing about him is you can play him anywhere. I mean, like, the only spots you don't want him are center field, catcher, and shortstop. Literally everywhere else, he's fine. So, you have flexibility with other players coming up and down with injuries, things like that. But I don't know if I would necessarily do that, because I want to make sure I'm leaving room for guys, in the next few years, guys like Weatherholt and Sajasi and, whoever else they end up, drafting and developing to have room to play in the big leagues.
I'm with you. The way I do it on those things is which of our players, if I'm running the Cardinals, could play or would be coveted by everyone.
Yeah,
so
right.
Which of
Good
our
way to look
players
at it.
could play and start right now on a World Series team, let's say. Donovan's definitely one. Mason Winn is another one. And that's kind of where it runs out, except for Ryan Helsley, obviously, but that's a totally different conversation that we're talking about. Am I missing anyone else?
I don't think so right now. I don't think so right now. I'm trying to see if I would stretch, but I think you could maybe think about it with someone like Romero or Liberatore, but I mean,
Palante.
It's not really necessary.
I know.
Because those kind of guys they're not going to be expensive players anyway. So playing it out, it's not that big of a deal.
With Kevin Wheeler, I'm Tom Ackerman. This is the Gashouse Gang. Let's continue our Cardinals conversation. And I can't get off this second base conversation. I really like this because it's so crowded. So First base, Contreras. Who plays second base? Depends on what happens to Arenado.
Right.
Does Gorman move over? How do you read that right now? Let me list them for you. Weatherhold eventually. We'll get into him. Gorman, Sajacy. Who am I missing? Donovan, obviously.
Brendan Donovan,
And, there's always the possibility of somebody else moving there, but those are the four.
Yeah, I'm going to work on the assumption that Nolan Arenado is going to be traded. It just makes sense, right? It makes sense for the team's goals and for his. He certainly doesn't want to waste time going through anything that's a retool, in part because of his age. What's he, 34 now? He doesn't have forever. And he has value to a contender. Again, we talked about this a lot, but the value is all about how much money the Cardinals are willing to eat, right? I'm going to play off the assumption that he'll be traded because it sounds like both parties are on the same page in that. So Nolan Gorman, as we talked about yesterday a bit during the Cardinals Monday, I think Gorman's the natural third baseman. It's where he played his whole life. It's where he played in the minor leagues. He only moved off of that because they got Nolan Arenado. So he's the most natural guy when you think about experience, but also skill set. He's got the strongest arm of the group of those guys that we're talking about. Probably the easiest transition. And by the way, Brendan Donovan's your best current defender at second base, right? I mean, he's good there. He's not just okay there. He's good there. You're a plus defender at second base with Brendan Donovan. So I like those two guys in those spots with Sajacy mixing in for both of them, right? Maybe look, Gorman's got to prove something this year. He doesn't get forever to prove that he can hit left-handed pitching. He doesn't get forever. His comp might end up being Jock Peterson. And Jock Peterson is a phenomenal hitter. Just posted like a 900 OPS this year, but doesn't hit lefties. That's only playing against righties. So he only plays about 70-75% of the time. Maybe that's what Gorman is. But either way, Sajacy's got to play, right? So you can get him time at second when Donovan needs a day off, or Donovan slides to left so Sajacy can play second when you're giving Newt a day off, or when Newt inevitably ends up on the injured list, which is seemingly too regular these days. But I think there's a lot of room to start Donovan and Gorman at those spots at second and third, respectively, and have Sajacy still get 400, 450 at bats, maybe more if he earns them, by playing some at second, some at third, some DH, and who knows, maybe you give him an outfield glove, although I don't know that you need to, because Donovan can just slide out there if you need to do that.
Yeah, big Sajacy guy here. I think
right-handed power, man. I mean, let's give it a look, because that can be your next guy that plays multiple positions and can put up offense. And then we're not there yet. I think we're going to get a pretty good idea on JJ Weatherholt in spring training. Like when we see him with major league caliber players and facing major league pitching, I'm assuming they're going to let him get some grapefruit league action. There's no reason not to. I mean, that's the number 7 pick in the draft, man. And he's 22. He's not some 18-year-old kid fresh out of high school that was picked number 27 overall in the first round. This is a guy that's close. And I've been thinking about Weatherholt and like why I want him to be so much of the conversation now. And it's because I think the comps with him are to me potentially ridiculous, right? Like the floor will be a guy that probably, again, the floor is going to be decent batting average, good on base skills, 12 to 15 home runs, and solid defense. That's your low end. But that's an everyday major league player. To me, that's the low end. I think he's maybe comparable to Jackson Merrill. A little bit different. He's not quite as big, right? Merrill's a big guy, 6'3", 195, 200. I think Weatherholt's listed 5'10", 190. But he reminds me of that kind of player, the way that he moves, that kind of athleticism, the hit first mentality with power that can come into all of that. I think Weatherholt's a 20, 25 homer guy once he's established in the major leagues. Another comp I've seen, this is, okay, so if you want like floor, Jake Cronenworth. That's your floor to me. That's your lowest. That's like the lowest level you're going to get from Weatherholt is Jake Cronenworth.
Good player.
Yes, absolutely. He's an everyday player on a really good team, right? So that's kind of why I wanted to throw that in as a floor, because that's what I think Weatherholt's worst case scenario is. I think a solid comp is, kind of Jackson Merrill-ish. Good average, good on base, some power, all that. If you're dreaming, if you want to dream about a guy like Chase Utley.
Ooh.
That's the kind of hitter he is. That I'm not saying he's going to hit 30 home runs a year or whatever for a 6 or 7 year stretch like Utley did, but that's the kind of hitter he is. The guy, that's the kind of approach with some contact skill, power, and on base skill kind of all tied together. If he were a little faster, I might throw in Jose Ramirez.
Wow.
I might, but like I don't think Weatherholt's going to ever be a 40-40 guy. I'm not that high on him. I'm not going crazy here. But Ramirez is 5'9", $190. That's what they list him. Weatherholt 5'10", 190 pounds. They're both similar builds. Obviously, Weatherholt a little slimmer than Ramirez. Now Ramirez probably weighs more than that. He's probably weighed but 10 years ago, something along those lines. But similar skill set in that Ramirez is a contact guy. He doesn't strike out. He draws walks. And the reason he hits for power is that he's learned to hit the ball in the air. So he makes a lot of contact and he hits the ball in the air. I think Weatherholt is probably, if you're like dreaming, that, but not quite the power or speed. I don't think he runs as well as Ramirez. Maybe physically runs as fast, but Ramirez is just such a great instinctive base runner.
Man, Chase Utley, he had the Cardinals number until the 2011 NLDS.
Yeah,
took care of those guys. But what a player he was. Let me say this too about the playoffs. Watching it for the most part, and the Royals come to mind, the Mets come to mind. Success is put the ball in play, make contact. Standing there and striking out, it just stalls. And I understand the new philosophy that infiltrated baseball, where it's okay to strike out because you're going after some power numbers and all those kinds of things. I just really feel like if the Cardinals can get into a habit of picking up players, the Sajasis, the Weatherholts, who are going to make contact and put the ball in play, it is going to elevate things. It doesn't mean you get rid of Nolan Gorman. You got to see what the guy.
No. It takes a balance, right? I mean, I have no problem with guys that are trying to hit home runs. I mean, look, number one, that's what gets paid in Major League Baseball. I mean, when you look at the highest paid guys, they're home run hitters, all of them, right? Pete Alonso doesn't hit for average, but Pete Alonso hits home runs and drives in runs, and he's going to get a huge payday this offseason. You need power more than ever. You need power, Tom, because it's harder and harder now to string together 3, 4, 5, 6 hits in an inning. It's really hard to do that because there's too many strikeouts in the game. But I do think that the sport is starting to come back to some balance from a philosophical standpoint, right? We went a little crazy with, grip it and rip it. Hey, if you swing and miss on an 0-2, that's fine. I do think that there's some coming around on that, and you can see it at the top of the draft. You can see it with guys like J.J. Weatherholt and Travis Bazzana going at the top of the draft, even though they're not 6'3", 220-pound power guys. They're guys with big-time contact skill. And but those guys also, I think what baseball's figured out, and they've started to perfect this, is that it's a lot easier to take a guy who makes a lot of contact and teach him how to hit the ball in the air and to get him in the weight room and make him stronger than it is to take a big, strong guy who swings and misses all the time to make more contact. I think that's the trend that it's going to be continuing to go. And look at the best hitters in the game, man. Look at Juan Soto. And Mike Trout, guys like that, they put the ball in play. Jose Ramirez puts the ball in play. It's not like we're going backward. What we're doing is meshing these two things, right? For a long time, power was the surging trend, and everybody wanted power, and they still do. You still need it. but we're starting to see, like you pointed out, in the postseason. And I think this started, Tom, what do you think? Maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago with the Astros. The Astros were one of those first teams that started to switch back towards guys that don't strike out, that put the ball in play. And, Altuve's not a huge strikeout guy. Bregman's not a huge strikeout guy. Yordan Alvarez, as big and strong as he is, not a big strikeout guy. So I think that's a good trend to keep on following. The game is going more in that direction. And most importantly, as we all talk about, like, the regular season is about large sample size, right? So if you say over the course of 162 games or over the course of multiple seasons, hitting more home runs will score you more runs, and therefore in the aggregate will make you better. That's all true. That's all accurate. But the postseason is about small sample size. The postseason is about moments. It is not about the accumulation of 1,000 events of one certain kind of thing. It's about one spot with a runner on second base and 2 outs in a 1-run game in Game 7 of a playoff series. It's about moments there, and that's where you got to have this balance that we're talking about.
The Gashouse Gang on KMOX with Kevin Wheeler. I'm Tom Ackerman. Love getting together and talking sports with my man Kevin, Bernie Miklas, Matt Pauley. They will be paired up throughout the week as well. We do it every day at noon live on all of our KMOX sports social media channels. Kevin, tonight the college football playoff rankings come out, and they will be out a little bit around 6 o'clock this evening. But
right,
for the purposes of chatting here and now, let's kind of handicap this thing. Oregon is going to be the number 1 team in the country. Yep. I don't think there's any doubt. They look it. They've earned it.
Yep. Until they lose, it's going to be them.
Number 2 is Ohio State. The only loss on their resume is Oregon. It was a great football game. I was glued to it. 2 of the best teams in the country. And as it turns out, here on November 12th, the 2 best teams in the country went head-to-head. And who knows if and when they'll face each other again. They're out of the Big Ten. The AP had in its top 5 4 Big Ten teams.
Yeah.
Texas moved up to 3. Penn State was 4. And my Indiana Hoosiers at number 5. And I'm reading a lot of different stories about them. Everybody trying to figure out now that they're 10-0, what they're going to have to do to lock up a spot. But let's first talk about who else might be able to jump in. One of the intriguing topics here, Kevin, is the fact that you have all of these 2-loss SEC teams. They've all now been bunched together. Georgia loses to Ole Miss. Ole Miss is back in the picture. LSU gets bounced by Alabama, who smacked them around down in Baton Rouge 42-13. And, Kevin, I think that the best of the 2-loss SECs right now is Alabama.
Wow, that's a tough call because, I mean, it's all about how Jalen Milroe's playing in a given week. There are some weeks where he doesn't look like an adequate passer, and then other weeks it's like he's in rhythm and he's on time and everything seems okay. The problem that we're going to run into is there's so much more left to play, right? I mean, Georgia's playing Tennessee this week. Mm-hmm. So that's going to either be another 2-loss team in Tennessee or Georgia's going to be out, right? Georgia will be at 3 losses and they're most likely going to be out in that scenario. What's really fascinating to me when we talk about the college football playoff mix is, while, you can have 3 or 4 teams in the top 5 right now from a conference, only one of them is getting a bye, because every one of the major 4 conferences is going to be a bye. So it's going to be a 1, 2, 3, 4 seed. All 4 of those teams are going to be there. So right now you're looking at Oregon. Who would it be in the SEC? Is it Texas that would be the top team in the SEC? Let's just use that as the example. Then you're looking at Miami in the ACC, and then BYU. Is that right?
Yeah.
Again, it's all pending the rest of the season, but like that's going to be what makes it more interesting after that, because Ohio State might be the number 2 team at the end of the year, but they won't be the number 2 seed. They will not. If Oregon's number 1 seed, Ohio State's going to be no better than the number 5 seed.
Yeah, what I worry about for some of the hopeful at-larges is if BYU, who's undefeated right now, runs all the way to the Big 12 championship game and loses, let's say, to Colorado, it's going to be tough to keep BYU out with 1 loss, which knocks somebody out. So it's kind of like a doomsday scenario. So, there was a lot to still unfold. How about Coach Prime? He's got his team back in the mix. You're right about that Tennessee-Georgia game almost being like a playoff game. And I've got BYU on upset alert. Now, I may eat my words on that, but I think Kansas is a better team than they get credit for. They were ranked early in the year. They just knocked Iowa State out. They've got, some loss. I think they have 4 losses on their, maybe 5. But they were pretty tight. They gave K-State a great run and ended up losing by 2. I think BYU coming off an emotional win over Utah. It better be careful here with the Jayhawks, who are playing really well coming in.
Yeah, I agree with that. When you're, and again, I think what's interesting as we play this out, because talking about BYU, and if that scenario were to play out that you just described, I think we could see a lot of these types of scenarios, Tom. I mean, how many cases are we going to have here? Whether it's let's talk about the Big Ten and the SEC, for example. Mm-hmm. The 2 teams that get to the championship game could all be 2-loss teams. So does a team that gets to the conference championship game then get eliminated from the playoff because they lose that game? So
right.
using an example, I'm totally making this up. Let's say it's Alabama against a 2-loss Georgia in the SEC championship game. And then you have 2-loss Tennessee and you have 2-loss Ole Miss. Does the team that loses the SEC championship game get knocked behind those other teams and they jump up? Or because the fact they're in the SEC championship game, do they get the spot anyway? That's what's going to be interesting to me. And that same dynamic looks like it could play out in the Big Ten. Right? I mean, that's what I'm really curious, because we've never had this before. We've never had the 12 team. We don't know exactly how they're going to handle this. Right? And by the way, I would much rather be having these concerns and making these arguments about teams 10, 11, and 12 than teams 2, 3, and 4. The one thing that we are guaranteeing under this current new system is the top 10 teams in the country will be there. They'll all be there. They'll all get their chance. Just a question of where they seed in. But there's going to be some interesting dynamics there. And it could all change. BYU could lose a couple of games. Colorado could lose. I mean, there are a lot of the Big Ten teams could cannibalize each other. There could be stuff that settles it, but we're also in a spot where you could legitimately see a team that ends up with 3 losses just because they got to their conference championship game. And how does that play? Does that mean no, you're the number 2 team from that conference no matter what? Or does you just get thrown back into the wash with everybody else?
Yeah, no, it's true. I'll give you another one that's not going to happen, but be careful of Arkansas at home against Texas this weekend.
Yeah, it's a rivalry.
That could shake some things up. That could hand Texas a second loss. Of Arkansas, who already beat Tennessee down there, rises up. But as for the Indiana conversation, it was a massive win over Michigan. Massive.
Oh, yeah.
Because now you're 10-0. Not that they're going to relax. They're going to go in there. Kurt Signetti's going to tell them, we're going to go in there and beat that team. But Ohio State, now if you lose to them, it's not the end of the world, because you have Purdue waiting in your last game. A 1-loss Indiana team, while not a guarantee, probably puts them into the playoff. Yeah. If you beat Ohio State,
you control your own destiny. If you beat Ohio State, I think you're in.
Yes.
Whether you win or lose the Big Ten title game, if you win that game, you're in. You're golden.
So,
that's your golden ticket, like Willy Wonka.
It puts them in a great position. I'll be curious to see what happens there. We can talk about it next week. Indiana and Ohio State. I think a lot of people think that this will finally be the time that Indiana loses. Ohio State's going to send them back to reality. Ohio State beat Nebraska 21-17. Nice win for them in Columbus. Indiana beat Nebraska 56-7. This could be a little tighter than people think. So we'll see. I don't know. And of course, that's coming from an IU guy that's been living this fantasy all year long.
It's not a fantasy. It's happening, man.
I mean, it is. It feels like a dream. It's insane. A couple other teams just to keep an eye on. Notre Dame has put themselves in a very nice position. Penn State's an interesting case. I know people are a little down on Penn State, but they are 4th in the AP. I'd be curious to see where they go. Boise State's going to be involved in this thing by the time it's all said and done. I look forward to seeing how all of this gets ironed out. As for Missouri, just real quick to wrap a college football conversation, if you did not see this already, it has been announced that Eli Drinkwitz is the sports personality of the year. The Missouri Athletic Club is going to honor him at the end of the year. And I think it's a good choice. I mean, in St. Louis, there weren't a ton of choices. If you looked at the Blues and the Cardinals, and the seasons that they have. And Drink started the year with a win over Ohio State, going 11-2. He's now 7-2 this year. And I think my point is, Kevin, if you got to step back if you're a Mizzou fan and look to see where you are. There has been a lot of mediocrity after Gary Pinkel's surge, and they are not only relevant, but they are a contender. Money is flowing into the university. The football stadium is getting renovated. NIL money is coming in. Eli Drinkwitz has changed the game at the University of Missouri, and this win over Oklahoma, however they pulled it off, I think increases like my feeling of what their identity is. Missouri's identity is they might not be the most flashy team in the country. They just find ways to pull out victories in what's been a hard year.
Yeah. I mean, that's the hardest thing to do. Look, this past weekend, that was kind of what I was talking about. Like, this past weekend was a test. You're not at your best, but you're facing a team that's more of a name than an actual team this year, right? Oklahoma's a program. It's a name, but they're not that good right now. And even if you're diminished and playing with your backup quarterback, it's still a game you need to win. And they did. It's ugly, but you won. I mean, like, nobody gives a crap about how ugly a win is in sports, but especially in football. If you win the game, you win the game. That's all good. And I feel this a similar kind of vibe for this weekend, although a little tougher, man. I think this one on the road at South Carolina is more like I expect a loss, right? Not an automatic. Mizzou is good enough to go in there and win that game, but I'm not sure they're good enough without Cook in that situation. South Carolina is not great, but they've got some real weapons. They're a little bit of a dangerous team, and they're pretty good on their home field. They
are. They're tough. They're physical. Spread on that one is 12.5.
Wow. Final topic. I thought it was going to be more like 8.
Ooh. I know. 12.5.
Wow.
Final topic with Kevin Wheeler, Gashouse Gang. I'm Tom Ackerman. The Blues take on the Bruins tonight at 7:00 at Enterprise Center. 5 years ago, the Blues beat the Bruins for the Stanley Cup. This is, they'll always be linked in that way. But the Blues are far from that Stanley Cup championship team. In fact, they're a little more like the team that hit rock bottom that year before Mike Yeo was let go. Craig Berube took over as interim coach, and everything went skyward from there. I don't know that I see that happening with this team, but let's start with this. They had a horrendous game on Saturday against the Capitals, losing 8-1, and I would expect a much better response from them moving forward, some consistency. I just don't know what to make of them anymore after getting trounced not once but twice by scores of 8-1, Kevin.
Yeah, I was looking at this on my phone because I want to make sure I get this quote right, because I think what we saw, you saw it, I saw it. I thought Jeremy Rutherford, who is as chill, as non-bomb throwy as you're going to get. That's for someone that covers professional sports. JR is not a bomb thrower, and he called it the worst performance he'd seen in 20 years from the Blues. And I don't know if I would go that far, but I don't have JR's, background. I mean, he's there every day, and he has been all that time. I've been there every day a lot, but not like JR has. But it was as bad as I've seen. And then I find this quote from Braden Shen, who said, talking about the Senators, once they got up, guys just stopped playing. Your captain said that multiple guys, and I'm assuming he's meaning more than like one or two, the captain of the team is saying publicly that a lot of his teammates quit in the third period of a game once they got down. That should send off alarm bells. Not what I say, not what you say, not what JR writes. When you've got the captain of the team who was here for the Stanley Cup, who knows what this team is all about, and I'm not taking him off the hook, by the way, nor did he take himself off the hook. He says it starts with me. He's the captain. Of course, he's going to have to wear that responsibility. But when that guy is saying that publicly, we have a real problem, because that means the messages behind the scenes aren't getting through. This is the same core of players that got Craig Berube fired last year. The same core. Yeah, there's some different guys, right? I mean, Broberg's new, Holloway's new, Broberg's out, of course. Robert Thomas is out, but that doesn't matter. We can understand wins and losses. Everybody understands struggle. Nobody thought this team was a Stanley Cup contender. right? I mean, I think that we were all looking at it and saying, okay, if they have a good year, they might squeak into the playoffs. That's kind of how they were. But the one thing that has to be there is effort. And when the captain of the team is saying it wasn't there, you're not going to tell me that it's only missing in the third period of one game. Because that tells all of us that that lack of effort and focus is also there in practice on a regular basis, and that it's been there in other games that are in the rearview window as well. That's what people should be pissed off about. The fact that, and again, Justin Falk said a lot of the same things that Shen did. And I'm not taking those two guys off the hook. They have their own things that they've got to be better at. But how do you recover from that? We've already fired a Stanley Cup winning coach because this group of guys wouldn't give enough effort. And there was a short turnaround when Bannister took over. And after that, it went back to the same. And now we're back in the same position we were a year ago, trying to figure out how you fix it.
I smell
Good luck.
I smell a Doug Armstrong press conference skewering the players and putting it on them. That's what I think.
I mean, at this point, look, we've all been critical of Army. He made a lot of bad choices coming out of the Stanley Cup team. Letting Alex Pietrangelo walk out the door was a massive mistake. Choosing Colton Parayko over Pietrangelo was a mistake. Other things that went down, probably mistakes. But it's not easy to manage the cap. I mean, I think we understand like genuine mistakes versus lack of effort. Right? I mean, but Army put the team together. Ultimately, Army has to wear it, but we also know that he's stepping down. Right? We know that Alex Steen is going to be the new guy in charge. The only way you change this now is not to fire the coach. It's not to play that dumb game again, because we already played that dumb game and it ain't working. You got to find a way to change out the core of this team. And I don't know how you do it with the cap the way that it is, with other teams watching these guys play, because the guys you want to get rid of, you got to sell to another team. So it's a really tough spot, man. It's a really tough spot.
Yeah, well, two thoughts before we go. One is it takes no talent to have effort.
Nope.
So you can have all the talented guys in the world. Your effort comes from within, and so the players are just going to have to be better. And the second thing is Jordan Binnington has saved them. My suspicion is this is the way it's been all year, but it's been covered up because Binnington's had some spectacular games.
Yeah, and we give Hofer some of that credit too.
Hofer too. Yeah, Hofer's had a couple of really good ones. Without those guys, maybe they're 2-13 or whatever. I mean, it's not good. So they've got to pick it up, figure it out. Binnington's going to start tonight against the Boston Bruins. Kevin Wheeler.
How about him getting stuck with wearing that the other night?
I know. And over.
God almighty. I can't believe that went well in the locker room later on.
Not a good day. And so here they are after a tough practice is what I understand, or a teaching practice is what Jeremy Rutherford said yesterday. Here they turn around today and take on the Boston Bruins at home. You got to play well at home. And how about not giving up a goal in the first minute? That'd be great. Kevin Wheeler, we appreciate you, buddy. You'll be on the DGS this afternoon.
Yeah,
I'm on Total Information.
15 minutes.
All right, you are. Thanks for joining us live. Thank you for all the great comments. I love these chats as well. I know Kevin does too. Matt Pauly and I will see you tomorrow on the Gashouse Gang from KMOX.